All right, I think we're ready to get started here. Have a good discussion. My name is Jeremy Gordon, City Transportation Engineer. Thanks for coming to have a good discussion on this North Broadway Bridge. Before we get started, I'd just like to introduce the project team that's been working on this over the last couple of years. We hired a consultant, SRF Consulting, Jameson Weiswinger. He drove up from Minneapolis today. Raise your hand if you would like. He could answer any and all of your structural questions if you'd like. And then with Clay County, we have Dave Overbo and Justin with the County Department, Highway Department. And then on our team, it's Tom and Brenda and myself. So with that, we can just get started. And we can do this however you want. We can go all the way through this and ask questions later. You could ask me as we go. So here's the bridge. We took a picture month and a half ago of the levee project up there. You can see the new cul-de-sac. The levee's pretty much right around the side of that cul-de-sac. So pretty cool picture to look at. So why are we here today? We are here today because this bridge, North Pier, is moving and it's not reliable anymore. So this is basically a picture sitting on the river looking to the east. So we were recommended to have this bridge closed in February, and we followed that advice, and we closed it as soon as we could. I should say we originally thought we could just rehab this pier, but upon further review, we think the whole bridge should be demolished, and if we're going to rebuild completely new. So what have we done since February? We did an online survey of residents on both sides of the river. We looked at deeper dives into the cost estimates on the reconstruction concepts. We further examined the road stability on our side. You may or may not know, about 800 feet to the south of the bridge, our road has a failure plane that likes to slide closer to the river. So we looked at how we could remedy that, and then we looked at traffic calming concepts on 10th Street if we choose to not replace the bridge. So the online survey we sent out right around Labor Day. Gave them the month of September to fill out the survey. So we sent 3,200 postcards to North Fargo residents, and about 800 postcards to Clay County folks. So we had 22% response rates on the Fargo side and over 30% on the Clay County side, which was really good to see. So here's the boundary of that postcard mailing. On the Fargo side, it was east of University Drive, north of 19th Avenue North. And on the Clay County side, we went basically 5 miles from the river to the east and up to Cragness. So a lot of sections of land there. Big footprint that we sent out to. So the results are pretty interesting. So the left pie chart's Fargo and the right pie chart's Clay County. So before the bridge was closed, how often did you use it? On the Fargo side, daily is about 17%. Weekly is about 50%. And on the Clay County side, upwards of 46% use it daily and 40% use it weekly. So you can see the daily rate is much higher from the Minnesota folks. So has the bridge closure affected your travels? On the Fargo side, 75% say yes. Clay County side, 88 to 90% say yes. So do you support rebuilding a new bridge? Obvious answer there is 88% on the Fargo side and 90% on the Clay County side. And then if you don't rebuild the bridge, do you feel that the County 20, County 26 bridge can fulfill the traffic needs up there? 62% of Fargo folks say no, and 67 on the Clay County side say no. So 1/3, 2/3 on that. So here's a little history on the flooding up there. This picture was from the 06 flood. The red lines, the east-west is County 20, and north-south is the Broadway Bridge. A lot's been corrected. Flood fighting measures have been improved since then. On our side, you can see the bridge on County 20 is currently under construction in this picture. So here's the Red River data from since we've been keeping track of the Red River levels. You can see this chart represents how many times this bridge at 23 feet has gone underwater. So you can see how many times per year. The vertical axis is how many times in that year. So you can see 07 and 1907 and 1911, there were 2 floods. And then we went 32 years without a flood, which is pretty amazing. And then you get to the later years here, you can see we're almost flooding every other year, year and a half on average. So this is a pie chart, just how available is this bridge. You can see it's open pretty much all the time except during those high water marks. So since this bridge, just this current bridge that is currently closed, since 1991, how many times has this thing gone underwater? So we've had 17 spring floods, average duration 18 days. And then we've had rainfall floods 15 times, usually 7 to 8 days that it's underwater. And when we do close the bridge or during the flooding or currently, this is the posted detour route. You can see the distance is 0.6 usually. We add a mile onto that for the detour. Now I will say people do shortcut 10th Street. They like to shave off some miles, but it still ends up being pretty close. So with the bridge closure, this is where traffic was rerouted. So 1,000 vehicles made it over to 10th Street, and usually that daily traffic's about 500 cars a day. So we tripled the amount of traffic on 10th Street. We put 1,500 over to University, and 350 kept using County 20 going to the west. So here's some costs. So estimated cost to demolish the bridge and do not replace it. We estimated it'd be $300,000 today, in today's dollars, and we'd split it 50-50 between us and Clay County. I know there is interest. We would need to figure out what to do with the road leading up to it. I'm just speaking from the Fargo side, but there may be interest if this was an option that we could put a park down here. Or I did hear from River Keepers, they may be interested in a boat ramp or boat launch. So what to do with the road, we'd have to figure that out later. But I would like to note that we should demolish it next year, regardless of what we plan to do, because it's a public safety hazard. It's just a bridge sitting up there. We don't want anybody on it. And there's people that go underneath it and it could fail. Really, we don't think it's going to fail, but it certainly could fail. It's just a hazard. So if we would like to replace it as is in 5 years from now, and I'm putting 5 years on here because that's our next funding opportunity for federal funds. And really, federal funds is the only thing that we use to supplement our money. I know Minnesota is funded a bit differently. They use federal funds. They also use state aid funds, which come through MnDOT. And then there's also bonding through the legislature. So every state's different. But we're looking at this, really it's a STIP project, State Transportation Improvement Plan. So that's why we're looking 5 years out. So the existing bridge is about 350 feet. We estimated to be $4.5 million to replace it as is, just the bridge. So each one of these has a bridge component and a road component. So the projected funding, we estimate to be 80% federal, 20% city. So on the Fargo side, it'd be 1.8 million federal, 450,000 city. And then on the Minnesota side, that's their lump sum, 2.25, and it would really be determined where they would get that money from. But I believe none of it would be local. It would either be state in one fashion or the other. So the road stabilization, I referenced that. You can see the slide with the X's on it. That road is too close to the river. Geotechnically, to be able to stand on its own. So we would want to move that over to the west. So where we can't move it all the way over, we'd like to, where we would want to, we would still have to stabilize some of the ground. It'd be a combo of moving the road and stabilizing it. So there's definitely a cost with that. We estimate $3 million. So total road and bridge would be $7.5 million. And the North Dakota side would pick up that road fix. So we're over $5 million on the North Dakota side and still that 2.25 on the Minnesota side.
And the federal cost is what? If we went for federal money on this, would we still have a cost share?
It would be 20% of our half. Yes.
The federal would?
Yep. So the federal would pay 80% of our side.
80%?
Yep.
Okay, thanks.
So if we wanted to replace the bridge and bring it up out of the river permanently, post diversion, we'd go from a 350-foot long bridge to a quarter mile bridge, basically 1,250. The estimated cost is 17.5 million. That's where you really see the numbers go up. So you split that in half. That's 8 3/4 for each side of the river, and our federal share would be 7 million. Our local share would be 1.75 million. And the Minnesota side is 8.75, and I guess they would have to figure out where that comes from the state. So we have 7 million. Our on this bridge it'd be 7 million federal. Under the previous one, it was 1.8 million federal.
What would you do with the houses in that area?
I'm getting to it.
Okay.
So other costs to bring this bridge up. You can see the houses, the neighborhood circled there in the green on the right. We believe that you would have to really bring that bridge to tie into that cul-de-sac to get it out of the flooding. There's a graphic later that shows it into the existing Broadway near the treatment plant. But we'd really, putting pen to paper, we really think you'd have to spend $2 million on buying them out, demoing them, and relocating them. And then you'd have to redo Royal Oaks Drive there in some fashion. We estimate $1 million there. So this project, to elevate it really gets to be expensive, $20.5 million. So 11 3/4 our side, 8 3/4 the Minnesota side. So these are the two different graphics. I mean, the green one is physically doable, but it adds about 800 feet to the bridge. Even a quarter mile bridge is a pretty long bridge. So the traffic data. So this pie chart is pretty interesting. So this is all the vehicles that cross the Red River in town here. So the red over 50% is I-94 going both directions. That's got 70,000 cars a day. Main Avenue is the orange. They got 20,000 cars a day. And then the green one used to be pretty small, but once we got that toll removed, that's our third largest crossing. That's at 13,000. And then we get down to the current Broadway bridge, and that's the purple one. And that's right around 3,000 vehicles a day. So I referenced the bridge length. So this is all those same bridges in there, just rough measuring their distance. So if we went with a quarter mile long bridge, 1,250, that'd be the second longest bridge in the metro. So the 94 bridge is 1,300 feet. County 20 is 1,000, and you can see those go down as you see there. So really, we're here to talk about what we want to do. Really, questions for you folks. What do we want to replace the bridge? Yes or no? So if you don't want to, we're still going to demo the bridge regardless. But we would bid out a bridge in 2022, remove the hazard, and then we'd have to look at how we can decrease the traffic volumes on 10th Street, because the natural detour is using a local street, which is 10th Street. And there are options to help things up there and to redirect people from using 10th Street. So the estimated cost, $300,000 to $400,000 for the bridge, and I've put in $100,000 for the 10th Street work, but it could be more or less on that. So if you want to replace it, you got two options: keep it where it's at or raise it up. So the existing option one is keep it where it's at. Estimated bridge 4.5, estimated road 3, and the total is 7.5. And on option number 2, raise it out of the diversion flows, 17.5, 2 and 1, that's 20.5. So currently, what you guys approved a couple weeks ago to send to MetroCog is option 1. If we want to change route, we should do that before too long here. But if it is preferred, we have to both look at our side and the Minnesota side. I haven't heard much from the Minnesota side as far as their funding is concerned. But I know 8 3/4 million on their share. They'd have to find it from somewhere. So that's really what we have for you today. So I'm open for any and all questions. Or I can go back to slides.
Arlette?
So, Jeremy, I'm trying to think, when you were presenting initially the findings on the bridge and that it was something that we couldn't be using anymore, I had thought at that point that there was a strong leaning towards not replacing it. What caused this to come back up on the table?
Well, it just here. Well, I think just internally, we've looked at these two bridges. There's County 20 and then there's Broadway. They are very close in proximity. They are unique, and they both probably have their same or their daily and weekly traffic flows. Internally, as staff, we thought, well, that County 20 bridge is so close. Let's really weigh if we want to replace Broadway or not. So I think staff initially said, well, that other bridge is so close. Let's rely on that. But as we thought about it further, it is nice to have redundancy in bridges over the Red River. If you have to close County 20, then what do people do? Then where do they go? They'd have to go all the way down to 12th, or even points further, or they'd have to go up north of here use the county river crossing. So we've really got to the point where replacing as it is fairly affordable with the federal help, and that's kind of where we've landed.
12th Avenue Bridge floods at what level?
28 feet.
28 feet. In 12th Avenue Bridge, if we bring it up to a 5 level, it won't flood. How much would that cost?
I mean, it would get into the $15 to $16 million range.
15 to 16.
Mr. Chairman, if I could.
Mr.
So,
President?
when, I don't know the rationale behind doing a survey, but when you surveyed them, obviously you didn't have the cost information in that survey. Is that right?
Correct. We had the cost information on the Clay County side, but not on the Fargo side.
Okay. So I don't put much stock in that survey because, whenever we're looking at projects, we have to look at, are we going to spend the money here or here? So there's another project that gets taken off the table if we put, $8 million into a bridge that only carries 3,000 cars a day. It just seems like that is a major part of the decision-making. So personally, I don't put any stock in that survey. The other part of it is 1 mile difference. I mean, what is that? 30 seconds, a minute?
Well, if you're driving the speed limit, it's 2 minutes.
Yeah,
But I hear you.
it's minimal.
Yeah.
So it just seems crazy to be putting two bridges so close together. That's my opinion.
Kevin, what do you think about this? We haven't heard from the Minnesota side.
Well, thank you, Mayor. We have briefly talked about this in our Highway Tracking Committee meetings, which Commissioner Gross and I serve on, and unlike maybe a little difference of opinion than Commissioner Preston, is that there seems to be significant residential support for the structure to stay open. And that, in our survey, did include cost dollars. Now, that estimate or that support did go down a little bit when you started talking 15 million versus $4.5 million. So I think it's, and again, it's from an area I'm from Oakport. That was where I started my political career, was there. And I do know that it's the North Fargo businesses have benefited greatly by having that bridge there for Moorhead residents and Clay County residents to have access. When you start lengthening, I had the opportunity to listen to your discussion last week, and I know, Tony, you'd brought up about the distance, and I think there's also a point to economic development that at some point in time, might they choose a different route and a different place to go entirely. Some of our Oakport residents really preferred shopping in North Fargo because it was handy for them. And now if you close that opportunity or make that lengthier, where do they go? So But I do want to address a concern that I would have regarding the two different options. And I think when it gets into us, and Jeremy, I think you said it well, when it goes to us being able to go to the state of Minnesota and asking for dollars in that range of $8 million, it's going to be extremely more difficult than going for 2.25. A little bit of history from the Clay County side is we do not have a special assessment process. We don't do it. So all of our funds for road and bridge, they either come through the state, whether it's our annual allotment through gas tax or it's through the bridge bonding. Those are our two primary sources of revenue for our roads and bridges. We do have a small amount that we put a levy across all of our people throughout the county. But that's a very small amount, and that is really triggered to areas that do benefit the entire county. So we have a restricted amount of money to use, and I don't want to take up too much time here, but I did also hear about the dialogue that went on about why would we build a bridge that can flood, and I really respect those opinions. However, I do know that bridges can be designed to flood. And I look at it from the standpoint that we do have the 2022 bridge right there. In the event that the Broadway bridge were to flood, and as long as it isn't restricting ice jams or what have you that creates additional backup of water, they can be designed to handle that. And on an inconvenience piece, to be able to go that 1.5 mile then is in those instances, I think is reasonable and something that neighborhoods could live with and expect to have. So, and again, I'm sharing my thoughts on this. We haven't had a lot of talk as a county board on this yet, but I really believe if we start talking about $8 million, it's going to be a difficult deal to do that.
Thank you. Comment? All right. Mr. Strand.
Thank you. Jeremy, I'm going to come at this from a whole different perspective. Let's say there is no bridge there, and we wanted to build one. What criteria do we have to adhere to with setbacks, with height, with flood mitigation management requirements?
Really, when we have our own city projects on a river crossing like this, we have to make sure that there are no river impacts, upstream impacts. I mean, we have to go through the environmental process, but essentially that's about it.
So
If you were a private developer wanting to build in the river, then it's a whole different world.
let me ask it differently. We wouldn't be able to build this bridge with the current height and setbacks, could we? With the diversion, the criteria we have everybody else follow?
So ask that again.
We wouldn't be able to build this bridge, the current level height span, with our criteria, to my knowledge, of flood management, floodway management. We don't build in the floodplain. We have setbacks from the floodplain. We have height levels. I'm guessing we couldn't build here from scratch if we wanted to.
No, we can. As long as your environmental impacts are negligible, you can still do that. When you talk about the LDZ and the MDZ, the limited disturbance zone and the maximum disturbance zone, those are our ordinances, but we are exempted from those basically. But from a environmental standpoint, if you put something in there that's not going to have impacts, it's allowed.
John, I think what John's getting to, Jeremy, is with the diversion coming through and all the different things with the diversions, did the rules change? If the rules didn't change, then you can rebuild a bridge, same height, no issue, build it so, and we're concerned about ice jams or backing it up.
Yep.
You're saying you can build in that location. There's no changes because of the diversion
I
project.
mean, we'd have to step through it delicately, but we believe it can be permitted.
Let me ask it differently. When we have all these impacted people from the diversion, from the flowage easements, or from the construction or the water flows, we don't let them rebuild into the floodway. Why would we be able to?
I mean, that is a philosophical question. I mean, it is a good question. Like, if you look at this drawing here, I mean, the high ground is where that neighborhood is. So in a perfect world, we would tie into that peninsula essentially. But we don't, I mean, it's going to be very difficult to fund that type of a project. I mean, I hear what you're saying on this.
I just want to have the same rules for everybody.
But I think, John, you're talking about development in the south part where we're putting in a floodplain and different things. This is a bridge with transportation, so the rules are a little bit different with transportation, Jeremy. You have a crossing, a connection, and that's a little different than building a stop and go or building something in the floodplain area. And I know that Brenda, we have a lot of rules in the area south of us beyond the dike, what you can or cannot do. That's part of the debate of farmland, is it developable or not?
Mr. Chair?
I can quick answer your question. So roadways are allowed. So you're correct. If a structure is looking to build, it's not allowed, but roadways are allowed. So what we would be doing is if it's built at this elevation, we would be looking at the hydraulic impacts and making sure that we don't have any hydraulic impacts. But in regards to the rules, roadways are allowed. And so this would be following those rules.
Have Garrick first and then Pepcorn. John, are you done?
I got a few things here. So if we built a bridge that could be flooded, would it last as long as a bridge that was, say, always out of the water?
I would have to ask our bridge consultant. I am certain it would be because you can design things to be more robust, but I'll let him go.
Yeah, so I guess maybe to step back with the bridge, the way the existing bridge was designed, it was not designed to last as long as well, I guess a modern design bridge, but even a historically designed bridge. If you look at Center Avenue, First Avenue, and even 12th Avenue, the old toll bridge, those were all designed with components that are that can move with the shifting soils that you have up here, that they're tied down so they won't float away like the bridges did in Katrina. So there are things you can implement that will lengthen a bridge in a floodplain that you might not have done 100 years ago or even 20 years ago.
So the concern I'm trying to get at is if we build a bridge that is designed to go into the water every once in a while, it will last as long as if we spend 3 times as much to build a bridge that never touches the water.
Correct. Yeah, the current standard is a 75-year design life. So
Okay.
that's what.
And I think that's one of the concerns that the commissioners had was that, if we're going to build it right, and so it'll last. And I'm sure Dave will tell us more about that, but that was one of the concerns that we had. So, to John's concern, I agree with you, quite frankly. We should have the same standards for the private sector as we do for the public sector. But I will note that this building we're sitting in was built in a floodplain. So, I mean, it's hard to say now that we should build this bridge when this building literally, until we built those walls and until we built all the other things that we did, when we broke ground on this very expensive building, it was in the floodplain, which I voted against. Or to your point of the cost, I totally agree. If we would have had a survey that said, hey, Fargo, do you want to spend $400K on a bridge for your local share, or do you want to spend $9 million? A lot of people would say, yeah, we don't need a bridge then, if it was $9 million. If it was $400K, I think that they would say yes. So I think what you're saying is very valid. But I think if we go with this lesser cost bridge that will supposedly last as long as any other bridge, that people would still say yes with that lower cost, because it is very important to that area. And I think if you talk to the people that took that survey, that they would tell you the same thing with that cost. But I think your point was very valid, that the cost does in fact matter. So I think, like I said at the last meeting, this is an important bridge for the region. Not just for the residents, but for people, like you said, with economics, people doing business up there. If I can't use this bridge, I might shop in Moorhead as opposed to Fargo and go to Walmart instead of Hornbachers up in North Fargo because of that. So I think it's an important thing for us to look at beyond that. And also, if we do the more expensive bridge, I think one of the things we're overlooking is this would be the longest bridge in Fargo with the least amount of people using it. And that doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So I think if we're going to rebuild, the only real option here is a bridge that is designed and built to flood once every 5 years for an average of 2 days at a time. That makes total sense. I think that people would appreciate us being responsive to their needs, but at the same time being responsible with their tax dollars.
Commissioner Pipcorn?
So, Mr. Chair, so this is about public safety. And so it'd be very interesting to show, when we have a flood now, if we have these floodable bridges, there are no access bridges to North Fargo. And apparently Commissioner Preston doesn't really care about what people in North Fargo or in Clay County think. But it's public safety. It'd be interesting to show, we literally have no bridges open then in all of North Fargo. No big deal. It's only North Fargo. I don't really care what they think. That's embarrassing. This is public safety. We have Amazon builds out there. We're going to be pushing traffic. I wish you would show that neighborhood, even though it's supposed to go on 10th Street or University, a lot of people cut through that neighborhood. That is not safe, period. And so this is about public safety. We have to have bridges that are out of the floodplain, period. When there's a flood and there's an emergency, too bad. Too bad. That's unacceptable. That's what we do. The leaders, that's what we do. We make tough calls. And to say it's okay if we build floodable stuff, what in the hell? What have we been doing for 20 years? Working on a diversion. So what do we need? Stuff out of the floodplain. Duh. All right, that's the end of my rant. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Preston?
So the local share of the funding for either of these projects, would it come from our infrastructure sales tax revenue fund, or would it be special assessed?
That's undetermined at this point. We
What
could
would
fund
be-
from both, but we do have a special assessment category for bridges, but it's a really small amount. It's like $0.015 per square foot.
Okay, so that would have been another question that would have been good to be asking people. If it has to come out directly out of their pocket, they may have a different opinion about it. It's not, definitely not that I'm not concerned about North Fargo. It is an issue of whether there's a reasonable alternative route. And when it floods, we're all inconvenienced. We're all driving out of the way to get where we need to go. So I don't know that, and I don't know, I can't remember how many days you projected or that the history showed that, that the bridge was not usable. There we go. 17 times since 1991. So 18 days, 17 times. I mean, yeah, in my mind, when you weigh the cost of it for the number of cars going over it, it just doesn't make fiscal sense.
Kevin, I had another question is, 12th Avenue Bridge takes 13,000 cars. It takes a lot more people going across. It can be utilized North Moorhead as well as North Fargo. That is probably a $18 million bid. Would that be any different for you? I've talked to you and many of your federal legislative people about some of this infrastructure funding, perhaps pulling some federal money in for that particular bridge. We've talked about 12th Avenue Bridge to raise it to the proper level would be about 18 million. And we've talked about Minnesota delegation, maybe a 50-50 cost share on that, and try to get federal money into it to help decrease the costs we have. And then to Commissioner Pipcorn's concern, we would have a bridge that we could go across in North Fargo. How hard would that be to sell in Minnesota if we had it as our major thoroughfare? And this one is a more minor one. I know the 8 million you talked about, but my sense on this one would be try to get federal to throw in more than Minnesota would have to.
For one thing, I try to stay in my lane, Tim, and when we talk about the North Broadway Bridge, the historical ownership of that has been the city of Fargo and Clay County. The bridge that shares 12th and 15th Avenue is not a county function whatsoever. And I'm here representing Clay County, and I think that discussion would have, regarding the 12th and 15th Avenue, would have to be with the city of Moorhead. I think that's where, but I do.
And we own it with them. It's a 50-50 call.
Right,
so.
yeah, but I guess in the question being addressed to me as a county person, in regards to 12th to 15th Avenue, I'm not as familiar with their funding mechanisms. I know that they do the same thing. They do, on the Moorhead side, have the ability to do special assessment areas for local costs, which is different than the county. So there are quite a bit of differences in that regard, but I certainly think that there would be some opportunities to share in that funding at the city level. But I just can't talk to it as far as at the county.
I appreciate that.
And I wanted to raise one other thing too, and again, going back to some discussions, and with my good friend Dave here, we might have our differences on this one regarding I look at that, and again, I'm going back even as my time as being on the Oakport Town Board. That North Broadway Bridge for all of our residents is basically a convenience bridge. And just like Elm Street is a convenience road, Elm Street still floods and we have to go around it. But it doesn't mean that you still can't get around it. And in regards to public safety, I do believe that the 2022 bridge is designed not to flood. It's certainly, because that was the purpose of that bridge. So, and that is also right there to help on the issues regarding public safety issues during a time of closure. So I just want to raise those as additional comments. But
Commissioner Pipcorn?
I just want to add, this is critical infrastructure. This isn't recreational. This is critical infrastructure, and obviously there's lots of federal funding. I think this is good conversation, but there's lots of sources besides just the city, and there's lots of federal things going on. I just hope we keep the discussion going. This is not recreational. This is not optional. This is critical infrastructure for North Fargo, period. And Clay County, Oakport's township, it's critical infrastructure for them too. If you need to get to the hospital, and let's say all the other bridges are closed, those 17 days, it's critical infrastructure. So I just want to repeat that, and I just hope we keep this conversation going. And to Jeremy's point, I think the first step is, obviously, we need, as our partners, to arrange to demolish that bridge, because obviously that's the first step, the safety concern. My only opinion that I'd like to add is, I know it adds more cost to make the bridge longer to avoid that cul-de-sac, but we've lost enough houses in North Fargo. We've given up a lot, and so I would much rather spend more money to have the bridge longer than to remove another neighborhood, and that's what that would do. I know it's preferred by the engineers to use the cul-de-sac and buy out the houses, but Mayor, we've bought enough houses, we've lost enough houses, and so I would much rather spend the money to make the bridge longer than to lose that cul-de-sac. That's just my opinion. But I do think that's the good thing about the diversion. We have good partners with Clay County and Moorhead now. I just hope we keep the conversation going, but this is critical. This is not recreational or anything like that. So that's my opinion. Thank you very much.
Commissioner Strand?
Thank you. Commissioner Pepcorn, I agree with you. I'm guessing we're all on the same page. The existing bridge has to be gone. I don't see any debate about that. The question is, then what? And one of the things I'd like to learn is, in the whole span of the city, looking forward, where are our highest needs for future bridges? What have we anticipated? Where would they be? I'd like to know that information now, rather than later and go, gosh darn it, why did you put it down there when we need these 3 locations more? I think that's critical data to know the needs of the future going forward. I'm just going to be really, really hard pressed to ever invest in something that impedes water flowage. I'm not inclined to contribute to backing water up, damming water up, holding water back, when our intention is to get it through the city quickly. And we've already decided the level of 37 feet through the city. I just can't fathom that we would change the rules midstream and say, well, we can, but you can't. So I think we need data. First of all, the bridge needs to be gone. Then I'd like to know what data we have for future needs, where they would be, if they're the 12th Avenue Bridge or if the Broadway Bridge. I don't know for sure they are. And then my desire is to build out of the floodplain.
Commissioner Gehring?
If we have the bridge that's designed to be flooded, will it change the flow through Fargo? Will it slow the flow of water through Fargo?
We would have to do research, but I'm pretty sure that it wouldn't. I will say, when you think about the Red River here, and sometimes we have a flow that's 37, 38 feet, this thing's 15 feet underwater. The lower it is, the least impactful it is. So it's like it's not even there when it's 15 feet underwater. So I'm pretty sure that there's pretty much no impacts with the current bridge.
And we talked about things like ice jams. That shouldn't be a thing during our flood, should it?
No, we don't have ice jams here in Fargo.
So just so we're all this, so we can all debate the same thing. You have to have a common picture. We're not talking about ice being rammed into these bridges, and we're not talking about a bridge that's a big sail slowing down water through Fargo. So I think as long as we can have an honest discussion, we can debate those things.
Well, I think in West Fargo, we did have concerns about ice jams through the Cheyenne diversion because the bridges over it were impeding the flow, and we did have some ice in that area. Concur what you're talking about. This is way above the bridge, so it's not going to be held up by the bridge. So you're not going to have that issue. But I do recall in 2009, we had a little trouble with ice on the Cheyenne diversion.
Yeah, it all relates with your river channel. And once the Cheyenne River's a weird channel, because as soon as you get out the banks, it starts flowing away. It's the silly river. But this thing, it just gets up and it just expands, and the higher you get, it just gets, the square footage is just, you don't have to worry about those ice jams.
Any other discussion? So as it presently sits, we put in your plan and voted at a commission that we wanted Broadway Bridge on the projected needs from the feds. It's
So as of this second-
5 years out, but just so the public understands, if the bridge is demolished next spring or next year, the replacement of whatever we put in there may take 3 to 5 years. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, I just want to make sure the public understands that if we take the bridge out, it doesn't immediately come back. If there's federal funding, some basket funding that suddenly comes in, we may be able to do the bridge sooner, and that's what we're hoping might come out of some of the federal funding. Is that correct?
Yeah, so we could, if it gets slotted for 2026, what I have heard is that the bridge funding, there's a lot more bridge funding out of this new bill than the old bill. So projects may slide up in years, but it certainly won't be available next year.
And then the
It could
status,
be like 3 years out.
and the status, the 12th Avenue Bridge, do we have that in any planning document anywhere that we eventually would like that replaced?
As of this second, no.
So how do we get that to happen?
Actually, it's in our long-range plan, I'm sorry. It is in our long-range transportation plan, not a short-term project, but a mid to longer term.
So that means 5 to 10 years,
Yes.
unless you find funding.
Well, we really only have, I mean, realistically, you guys could talk about other funding sources today if you'd like, but we've got our city sales tax, and then what we in North Dakota do is ask for federal aid. I'm not a great financial mind, but I know the city has bonded a time or two previously, but it's very rare. We could think about bonding, using our own bonds to pay for this infrastructure.
So, Mr. Chair, can I jump in real quick? So I do think this is a discussion that we should have in the future. Obviously, federal funding could be a potential thing, but I also think, the engineering department, they feel under pressure to come up with funding all the time, and I think sometimes we should take that responsibility from them. I think it's a great thing, but I do think bonding, I think we should consider that, because a bridge is a long-term investment, and so we could, at least I think that should be in the mix of our discussion, especially right now. Interest rates are historically low. For a long-term investment, infrastructure investment like this, I think it's something we should talk about. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
So the other question I have with a partner in Minnesota, Kevin, if they balked at 8 million and we said we want to build a bridge, and Minnesota says we won't fund that much, are you held up on the eventual build of the bridge till Minnesota comes up with funding?
Yes, we would be.
So we can't proceed at one step unless Minnesota finally has a plan in effect to bond something and pay for half or whatever the parts they were paid for.
Yeah, I can speak a little bit about the Minnesota side. So they on the federal aid side of the world in Minnesota, they do go out as far as we do, 4 to 5 years out. But on the bonding and the state aid, that comes much quicker, I believe.
Yeah. State of Minnesota has bonding every 2 years for projects, so,
So if we had a project and we gave it to you, then we would just wait for your legislative body to make a decision.
right, yeah, yeah. But I do want a little bit about funding right now, and I do really agree with what John just said not too long ago, that we need to agree that this bridge isn't safe and it needs to come down. I've listened to the technical people on both sides of the river. I sat in a couple of those meetings, and I am completely convinced that we should not allow any pedestrians or anybody over that bridge right now. Having said that, I think it's from our side of the river, MnDOT, the state of Minnesota does have a bridge replacement or bridge tear down type of a mechanism in place. And I believe they have it to the tune of like $30 million set aside for that type of project. And, you know, if we're in agreement, we would certainly like to get that process moving right now in terms of requesting our side, our share in the removal of that bridge. I think that's extremely important to get that done.
I think we can all agree on that. Commissioner Pepcorn?
One more thing real quick. So I do think Minnesota, their participation in the diversion, that has to be on Minnesota projects. And I think this should be put into the diversion authority discussion anyway. And I know it's a open topic, but I do think it should be one of those things. And this might be a thing that Minnesota would get credit for participating in the diversion more or something like that. I don't know if I'm saying it quite correctly, but the diversion authority and to have this as part of that project should at least be considered. That's just me. Thank you.
Well, Kevin, I'll just ask Kevin one more question about that. The money that is funded for the diversion on the Minnesota side, does that have all projects all attached to it? So you don't have a contingency on of 20 or 30%?
Yeah, so the $83 million commitment by the state of Minnesota on this project, as I know of right now, is already dollars spent on the project. So going to Commissioner Pipekern's suggestion about having it part of Minnesota's share, I mean, it could be done, but we would then have to ask for increased financial support from the state on that too. So whether it would be Minnesota's cost share as part of the diversion, or whether it's Minnesota's cost from a bridge replacement process or bridge bonding, it still has to be approved by them. You know, so, and I think just based on the temperature that Minnesota's had, I think they're more inclined to want to build bridges. Just to be honest with you.
It'd come out of the bridge fund. Commissioner Preston?
I'm not real clear. Are we just getting the information today and we're making a decision in the future? Is that, and if so, a couple of things. One would be, I didn't really think about the fact that we would have to take action for this bridge to come down. So it seems like that needs to be done for sure. But secondly, I'm going to go back to the point that Commissioner Strand was making about being able to see the bigger picture. And if you have some plan out there that indicates future placement of bridges, that would be helpful, I think.
I can speak to the bridges. So currently, the only vehicle bridge that we're looking at in the future is on 76th Avenue South. And then there's one pedestrian bridge on 40th Avenue South that we're currently asking for funds to construct. But there are no vehicular bridges other than 76th Avenue that we're looking at. And it was before my time when MetroCog studied 32nd Avenue, 40th Avenue, that decisions were made to not move forward with creating a crossing. So we're down to 76th Avenue is our next in
So
town.
nothing further north.
No,
20th Avenue is the furthest you have?
County Road 20.
County 20?
County 20?
Yes.
Okay.
Mayor, can I, if I can, just to follow up to those comments just now, and I'm glad that MetroCog has been involved with this, and I, you know, from a long-term standpoint, we've done an awful lot of work on our County 1 project, which is the road that the Broadway Road goes to. It connects to our County Road 1 and it goes up north. And we are going to do a major reconstruction of County 1 up to County Road 26. You know, from a MetroCog standpoint, when are we going to be seeing a bypass system like in the Fargo Morehead area, like we have that we see in the Twin Cities with 494 and 694? Very, you know, and would that be 26? Then how could that change traffic that would come on to County Road 1, you know, on the Minnesota side that would lead into North Fargo as well? There's a lot of things that still should be at least briefly talked about in planning. If you're going to be building something that's going to be good for 75 years, you should maybe know what it's going to look like, traffic's going to look like in 75 years. So I'm just putting that out there. And then on the 76th Avenue piece too, I think there needs to be some dialogue with Clay County on that one going on right now as well, to make sure, you know, when you start talking about new bridges, there's also corridor issues. And are we preserving those corridors the way they should be preserved for those events? So I'm glad, and I just want to thank you for inviting us to this conversation
Well,
today.
And I think, Kevin, when you bring that up, at 100th Avenue, we've talked about a bypass going around the city as well, following the diversion, actually going up to the county, so the truck traffic would be diverted outside of the city entirely. So I think, to your question, I think we probably should have a MetroCog type discussion of where are your bridges, where are your bypasses, what are you guys planning in the future? For those of you who don't go to MetroCog, John, we could probably do a brown bag or something to talk about future transportation issues. Commissioner Preston, you've been very patient. Did you have something? Oh, I'm sorry. Commissioner Garrett, no? So this was just information. We'd have no action, but we probably could bring Jeremy action of takedown of Broadway Bridge to our next commission meeting and have a vote on it. That shows Kevin has shown some support of that as well, and maybe get that rolling so you could have it done next summer.
Yeah, the good thing is the capital improvement plan for the next year or two. Brenda and Tom are going to bring that to you tonight as an informational item, and then in 2 weeks for an action item. I believe that's the plan.
And it's on there? Brenda, it's on there?
For tonight, you guys are going to be hearing more about that on tonight's regular agenda.
Any other business to the group?
If I could, you guys threw out a little bit of MetroCog stuff. I'm not speaking on behalf of Cindy, but let's see if I'm paying attention. Currently, we are looking at routes around the perimeter of town as part of the interstate operations study that's really in its infancy. We just hired a consultant earlier this spring. So to your point, I mean, you're talking about a river crossing north of here and how does 336 make its way up to here? We're discussing that as part of that study, or that study. And then on the other side, there's we're looking at a route to get from Harwood to the other side of West Fargo using the diversion alignment. But that's a mirror of this. So those things are always up for debate, and we do want to secure right away on the 76th Avenue corridor at some point in the future. So no action today, though.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.